Great. Well, we'll call the meeting to order in a second. I just, wanted to say welcome to Dolores. And I just sent a quick email out this morning, Dolores, but this is new news to folks. And Sabrina, I don't know if maybe you wanted sort of a little bit of an introduction, but, I'll just say for myself, it's been a lot to try and figure out how to, move forward as a board without the institutional knowledge of, having Rick and Sal with us. And, we've been trying our best, but been struggling clearly with that. So really appreciated Sabrina and Nancy reaching out to Dolores, who was on the board when I had started, but who had stepped off because, I think was glad that there were new folks coming in and served in a lot of roles over the years. And maybe you can just introduce yourself a little, Dolores, to folks who don't know you, but just really appreciate her stepping back in to just provide us with some of that stability and that institutional knowledge that we've really just been struggling asking. Just very grateful. And thank you, Dolores, for your time, because we know you do a lot of other things in the community have done for a very long time.
I'm looking forward to meeting new people and serving with new people. Okay.
Man.
And we can't see you, Dolores. We can just sort of only see the top of your head. I don't know.
Okay.
Camera angle.
There we go. No, somehow I got moved on the where I am. So I lost my.
The easiest thing might be just to raise your chair if you're on one of those chairs with a raise and lower thing.
Okay, because you had me fully before, but I got moved around.
Yep.
Can LMC TV move me to another place on the screen and maybe no? Okay.
Can you tilt your screen down?
Tilt my screen down. Okay, we can do that. That's better. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. All right. And I'll keep my head in the air. Okay.
Okay, so let's, I guess, officially call the meeting to order and just, discuss the agenda. Primarily, and my apologies, at the last meeting, Diana had prepared some materials that she wanted to share to discuss the tiers that we have, within our application process. And I was doing this and having this. So that was really the reason to reconvene today, sort of off the regular meeting schedule, just to really focus in on that. And then Barry, since we're all together, maybe also worth you sharing with us your conversation with the folks at Westchester, Community Solar. I'm forgetting that Sustainable Westchester. Thank you, because I know you've been in touch with them. So maybe those could be the two agenda items for us today, with Diana kind of going first and the topic she wanted to discuss. And Diana, if you wanted to share your screen, if you want to go through the PowerPoint, that would. That would be.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this was something that I, just wanted to look into because I think you guys all know that we had an issue with the affordable housing vouchers, where we were operating under the understanding that was a ceiling, not a floor, and so had put a cap on folks at 25%, which is not allowed. It's against the law to discriminate against people who have housing choice vouchers. So I started to look into, the tier system and just who was living at the apartments. And I just wanted to share some of those findings with you guys. So these are just pulled from Nuno's reports, the most recent one that he sent. And so there's 9 different tiers that were established. And you can read through the different tiers if you want. I think Melissa circulated this, and I'm sure that Dolores is already familiar with this. So that's the overview, and that's what it looks like as a percentage. So, the majority of folks are sort of tier 3 and below. Any questions on this?
Just give me a quick summary of I talked about there was an issue with Section 8 vouchers.
Yeah, so there was a misunderstanding that that there was a cap on the amount of Section 8 housing choice voucher holders that could, be at the hummocks, and that cap was 25%. And that's actually incorrect. That's a minimum, not a maximum. And as Anna Denoy, reminded all of us, it is illegal to discriminate against anyone by type of income. So a housing choice voucher is a type of income. So not only is there a floor in terms of, we must be over 25%, but we're not legally allowed to turn people away who have housing choice vouchers if there's a vacancy. So that was really, but we're not operating under that impression previously.
Is Anna saying that if we have two tenant candidates and one has a Section 8 voucher and one doesn't, that we have to take the Section 8 voucher person?
No, you're just
Okay.
not allowed to discriminate against people. So
I'm not so, okay. We originally mandated when it was built that there would be 10 units. There was no requirement, but the town decided to make 10 units. And then the supervisor asked us a few years ago to increase it. And I think the 25%, Sabrina, came up as I forget why, and we were happy to do it at 25. But you're saying now, I just want to be clear that there's no minimum or maximum. We have to interview any candidate who happens to have a voucher.
no,
No, there is a minimum.
There is a minimum. The 25% is the minimum.
Is interpreted as a minimum, and who interpreted it that way?
It's in the MOU.
It's in the MOU.
Okay.
Well, the MOU says 20%.
It's pretty clear. It used to be 20%. I think it was raised to 25.
It was raised to
25% now. Oh, yeah, it might have been in the amendment. They might.
Yeah, it was in the amendment
Amendments,
In the
25%.
amendment. Okay, yeah.
to the land lease. It's not really an MOU, it's a land lease.
It's in the land lease that when we went to 25% when we renewed the land lease. Okay. Because originally, I don't think it was our own self-imposed requirement.
Yeah, I think another way of looking at it is just that beyond like the 25%, any other applicant who applies, it really just goes to the tiers. And if they have a voucher or they don't, it's just not part of the equation. Do the regular evaluation, and that's just not one of the factors.
Okay.
If someone can, if we went back to Dolores's example where we had two people that were otherwise identical, and one was on a Section 8 voucher and one wasn't, are we flipping a coin? Would we pick the Section 8 over the other one if they're otherwise equal, or how is there some criteria that we've set up that would favor one or the other? Well, we cannot disfavor the Section 8, but can we favor the Section 8? All else being equal?
Well, you might have to if the percentages go below 25%.
Right. True. Right. If we go, but assuming we're above the 20, if we get above the 25,
We're right at 25% now.
I see that.
So if somebody moves out, we're gonna almost have to pick a Section 8 person somehow. I don't know how you know up front without discriminating and asking people. I don't know.
If somebody moves out of any of the Section 8 units, you mean?
Yes.
Any of the third, yes, yeah. And sometimes nobody has a Section 8, they're very hard to get. And hopefully Biden would go back to increasing them, but they're really, really difficult to get a Section 8 voucher.
If let's say one or two of the people are Section 8 now left, and no one applies that has a Section 8 voucher, do we have to hold those units open to keep them open for Section 8, or could we fill them and go below the 25?
I don't know, because it's never been an issue, because Anna's always had people with vouchers who needed a place to live. So, there's a wide circulation as soon as there's an apartment available, and she automatically gets a phone call. And it's just never come up. Could it come up? It could come up now because they're so difficult to get. And they are issued countywide. There was a time when it only could be used in the community when it was issued. But that changed quite a while ago to anyone in any place in Westchester County. So,
And Frank, just for your benefit, Anna gave us some background information, and in 2017, the town opened up applications for housing choice vouchers. And there was 10,143 people that applied, and of that, 800 applications were accepted through a digital lottery. And of those, 670 of the accepted applicants have gotten a voucher. And so obviously there's a lot of people that are, seeking vouchers and seeking, place to live.
Right.
So of those 670, only 260 of those applicants actually reside in Mamaroneck and Larchmont due to lack of places that they can afford.
Right.
And discrimination against people with housing choice vouchers.
Also, they,
Did we hijack your presentation, Diana? Do you still have more you want to go through? We sort of just
it's okay.
jumped in.
I mean,
Apologize.
No, it's important, to get aligned on this. So, no, that's why I stopped sharing, because I thought,
yeah, can I make a comment real quick?
Please, Nina.
So
Yep.
after they receive a voucher or the paperwork, they can start applying for apartments, but they're set for a certain amount of time in which they can use the voucher, and oftentimes it can get extended, but usually they run out of places and then they lose their voucher and they're back on the list. So that's why there's a lot of vouchers that are issued, but not a lot that are used. Also, yes, there's a limited availability of places in which landlords will accept it. So yeah, that's a predicament.
Can I ask a fundamental question?
Sure.
How much is the rent in these units? I apologize. I don't have a sense of,
Okay.
Can someone afford, because someone who's eligible for Section 8, can they generally afford the apartments? I don't have a sense of.
But at Homics in general, or?
Yeah, I think, at the Homics, I guess, yeah.
Sure. So I'll give you the list. And keep in mind that a lot of these Section 8 apartments are the standard 1 bedroom, because that's because certain vouchers are designated for 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms. So at Homics, we have 53 total units. 1 is for the superintendent. There's 3 1 bedrooms, 22 1 bedroom and lofts, 4 2 bedrooms, 13 2 bedrooms and loft. Those are, and then there's 6 1 bedrooms and 5 2 bedrooms. So that's the breakout of the apartments in general, right? And then the cost of each apartment, and this is doesn't include utilities. Utilities are always billed directly to the tenant. The rent for a 1 bedroom is $1,233 for a 1 bedroom, $1,385 for a 2 bedroom with loft. 2 bedroom is $1,551, and the 2 bedroom and lofts are $1,748. So go ahead.
Well, Frank, the way this Section 8 works is the tenant pays 30% of his or her income, and the federal program pays 70%. So you could have a tenant who has no income, and Section 8 is paying the whole thing, or they're paying $50 a month, or they're paying $500 a month, and they register with Anna, and they provide income, and they get certified, and that's how the number comes out. We get the same rent, the Section 8 rent, but we mostly get it from 2 different sources.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, they do an annual recertification every year, usually around the time their lease renews. So they go there with their lease, income verification, tax returns, pay stubs, etc. And then they determine on what the tenant share is and what the subsidy share is. The subsidy share is always received via ACH credit on the first of the month. It's applied to their account, and the tenant is.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay. All right. Thank you for that help. That's helpful.
And Frank, to your question, there's, no distinction between, people who have Section 8 housing choice vouchers and those who don't. It's based on the tier system. So if they're a voucher holder and in tier 2, that person would be, selected if the other applicant was in tier 5. But if that voucher holder was in tier 5 and the other applicant was in tier 2 would be prioritized. So the waiting list, the queue to get in is determined by the tiers and not by your type of income.
Right, I understand that. I kind of figured. I was, when I did the section with and without the section 8, I was saying 2 identical people, so meaning tiers and income and everything else. So. Okay. So what is our goal? Is our goal?
Oh,
to
and actually,
increase-
sorry, to answer that question though, I think an easy answer, it would be whoever got on the list first in that case.
Okay.
Priority.
What is our goal of the conversation there? Are we trying to increase the number of section 8? Are we trying to, I guess I was wondering what we're trying to do here. Or are we worried that we'll go below the 25 and so we need to get a few in there to make sure we don't go below our floor?
It was oh yeah, no, I didn't bring this up. I mean, as I said before, it's illegal to discriminate against someone with a voucher. So all people who apply, who are eligible, go on the waiting list and wait their turn in line. And, that document has said that it's a 25% minimum. If you guys want to talk about changing that, we can do that. Mine was more to give an overview
Okay.
of the tiers that exist and that how they break down currently. It wasn't necessarily to guide it in that direction.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to continue, Melissa?
Please do. Thanks,
Okay.
Diane.
Okay, so we've already looked at those first 3 slides, so you can see how it breaks down. And then if you want to look at this as a whole, so if you add up tiers 1 and 2, so those are, town employees and volunteer firefighters, ambulance corps, full-time employees, those make up tiers 1 and 2. And then all other tiers come out to about 60%. Any questions on this?
I want to make a comment on that. So obviously we abide by the tier list, and a lot of the people in tier 8 make up the section 8. And also some of those in tier 8 and also 9, they are long-term tenants who've been there 20 plus years that probably got an apartment when, this wasn't, the hottest ticket in town. So, those numbers have come down over the years of the tiers, and they're starting to be more concentrated in tiers 1, 2, and 3, especially more recently. So just keep that in mind. So the numbers are somewhat skewed, but, at one point, it was a struggle finding tenants to move into Homex, and now it's rather easy to get someone in there.
Yeah, I was wondering why we were so, given the waiting list there's a lot in tiers 1 through 5 or 6, why we had so many in 8. But that makes sense that they got
Yeah.
It's sort of like rent controlled apartments, right? Once you get in, they stay in.
Well, for a while it was that way, but we've been seeing an increased amount of vacancy over the last probably around the same time as the pandemic hit. We used to have 1 vacancy a year, and that was a bad year, and we've been getting a lot recently due to other circumstances.
So any questions on that presentation?
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, I was on mute. And I just, could you maybe just elaborate a little, like what you're seeing? Because I'm just curious, like what it is. Is it folks can't afford it, so so they're moving out, or people just kind of whatever their personal reasons are, just exacerbated by the pandemic? Do you see sort of any trends there that we should?
Well, the long-term trend of people moving out of Homex was, they were able to afford a home after many years of living in Homex, which is always a great success story that everyone wants to hear.
Right.
But more recently, it's people moving out of the area or moving in. And we have a lot of elderly folks at Homex. So a lot of people are moving in with their son or their daughter. So that's typically the trend. People are just either moving out of the area or they're consolidating households. That's been the theme recently.
That's helpful. Thank you, Nina.
And is that, and is that coming out of, is that including tier 8? Are people leaving that tier as well, or is it other tiers mainly?
Any tier, it's the theme really. We've had in the past, there was a lot of tier 1, 2, and some 3. They were able to afford a home after living at Homix for 8-9 years, and then they were able to move on. And what we're
Unfortunately, to other communities, rarely can they afford to get a
correct.
house down.
Yeah, usually up north.
Okay.
You're on mute, Melissa.
I would think after all these months, I would have that down. So Diana, were there specific questions you wanted to pose to the board, sort of, as a follow-up to what you just presented?
Yeah, it was basically taking a look at that tier report and seeing if it is, meeting the objectives, with, supporting the local community and the workforce housing and, the residents of Mamaroneck and, and Larchmont, because a lot of folks, don't necessarily fall into that bucket.
Did you have specific thoughts to sort of kick it off? Just, in terms of your reflection on looking at this?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that, it looks like we're doing a decent job at the workforce housing because that's 40% of the apartments, but, the others seem to be going, to other, other people that, some of them all other persons or just, residents of Westchester County. And like Nuno said, some of those may be legacy tenants. But if this is, intended to serve our community, wanted to say, is this serving our community in the best way? If it's, really accommodating people from all other persons in Westchester County and people who potentially have no affiliation, with Mamaroneck.
Oh, one thing we expanded our notice list. Remember, I don't know, I gave Graham, I put together a huge email.
Yeah, we still use that list.
So which included not your organization, Frank, but I had a friend who does a refugee organization in New Rochelle, the Community Resource Center, which I believe at the time was the Hispanic Resource Center. So there is a huge dissemination when there's an opening. And frequently, and no, I may be wrong, but the wait list didn't work because people went on the wait list when they needed an apartment. And maybe they're on the wait list in 2016 or 17 or something like that. So once we did that dissemination, we did get, for some reason, for instance, the school district had been left off the old list. So we had a couple of teachers that came in at the time. So I don't know what more we could do, Diana, because the outreach is, and what we have to do is expand the outreach and make sure that it's still going to Community Resource Center. And we can look at that list. There's why we got a specific contact person at the school district who did employee assistance or something like that. So we worked on that, but that's 5 years ago. I mean, it needs to be worked on again. Maybe it goes into the email at the Community Resource Center and nobody quite realizes what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be happy to work with them to make sure, those are getting, to the right people. Because I certainly know there are many, many people in our community, who are, looking for housing and looking for safe and affordable housing. So, meeting that demand, is crucial. So I think that's a good suggestion, Dolores.
Do we refresh the waiting list? I mean, I saw some people have been on there for 6-7 years. Do we?
Yeah, it's constantly tended to. What you saw probably the last meeting.
That's what I was looking for.
Pruned significantly. We try to keep in contact with people and make sure they're still A, eligible, and B, still interested. So that list was pruned. It's typically pruned, as vacancies come in, we start calling them. They
Okay.
tell us they're no longer interested, they're removed, or they're not. And here's the issue, and I brought this up in the past, is with a waiting list is, some people are in a lease, so they just can't leave where they're currently living to move. So a lot of people, the timing never works out,
The timing's a big issue or problem.
Right, because if they were able to leave, I mean, the top 4 tiers of the waiting list would fill, if everyone in section, tier 8 left, we would be able to refill them in tiers 1 through 4. So, I mean, but that's, the waiting list isn't big enough, I guess, because of that timing issue.
Well, yes and no. I mean, as I said, once this gets distributed to the distribution list, we immediately get calls from all the volunteer or, the firefighters, et cetera, right away. So we typically get an applicant from that base or the employee base, because this gets distributed. It used to get posted in, the certain offices, and people would see it, and we would immediately get, contact. But now with a lot of things being remote and people not having that sense of community, it's been a little harder to fill these apartments, and people possibly don't want to move during this time. So historically speaking, we used to get instantly, we would do this on a Friday, the email blast, and on Monday you have 30 people vying for the apartment. It's not that way now. Not that the apartment isn't as attractive, it's just, it's different times now.
Okay.
Do we have any vacancies now or coming up?
We have one, and I don't know if you guys want me to do my quick, I can keep my operational, speech to 5-10 minutes, but we have unit 54 available. It is a 2-bedroom and loft. It should be ready by the first. There's some structural stuff going on in there, which I can kind of go into detail. But I did put out that email blast last week. I have a few leads. I'm still sorting through them. I actually just had someone email me this morning that I will discuss it with them. But yeah, they're all tier 1 and tier 2. And so far from my dealings with them, they're the ideal candidates.
And are the tiers relatively evenly spread among the different size apartments?
Many moons ago, probably close to a decade ago, I did a spreadsheet on it. I can probably maybe rehash and do something. But no, they're not. From what I believe, they're not.
Nuno, I think it might be helpful to the board also to see the list of places to which you disseminate the information now, because Dolores, I remember when you worked on that, it was maybe 3 years ago. It was right when I became
Probably more, so that should be
So
updated.
it's pretty up to date, and I think it would be really helpful for the board to see where you send out the request.
Okay. I mean, I can give you the emails I send it to, and if you have new ones, that'd be very helpful. I mean, who do you want me to forward this to?
I guess you can send it to me, Nuno.
Okay.
Share it out to everybody. It's just a point of information, so I think that's fine to do.
And as I said, one thing we did at the time was we did some follow-up to make sure that it was going to the right person. And we did assignments, for instance, it wasn't going anywhere at the school district. I forget where it was going, but it wasn't going to a person who would be disseminating that in, because sometimes for the organization then has to disseminate it to their membership or their whatever. So that's why I said, Diana, it could be, say, a community resource center, just have a box that's dropping in, doesn't even know what it is.
Yeah.
So a little follow up on who we're mailing to could be.
Yeah, I've never really gotten any feedback from anyone at the school. So the person I currently have, their email is CPRIORE at at the school. I don't know who that is.
Voucher is no longer there.
Okay, so I need that new. well,
Probably
that's,
an old, if it's 3 years old, that's out of date. So yeah, maybe circulate that. That's super.
So that's a
Okay.
really important task to keep
Okay.
that updated probably more regularly, and it probably is a job now to find out at each organization.
And also, communicating directly, so that when these things come to people, they know what to do with them, that maybe, comes with some instructions or something.
Yeah, it's like a one pager that was meant to post in like a designated areas, like at the firehouse, they posted in like their eating area. And so, yeah, we did start this, I think 2 or 3 years ago when we began this distribution list. So, yeah, I mean, if I'd love to have more people to distribute this to, I'd update my distribution list, and we can go from there. I mean, the more people that know about this, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think too, now, in addition to whatever print flyer, maybe there's, we craft something so it's just easy for them to forward, and people can kind of, whoever this goes to, the contact can just forward it on to their distribution.
So Melissa, I'm going to send you the list, and I'll send you the flyer that was drafted.
Perfect. Thanks, Great.
No,
Are there other points?
have any issues when they come to inspect the apartment?
In terms of Section 8,
Yeah,
where do I begin? For a while, Anna's staff was the
I know.
who was inspecting it, and then they outsourced it to McWright, and they're not very good. They don't make appointments, so it's tough, but we have no issues. In general, I would probably rate it an 8 out of 10. It's going as good as it can during these times.
yeah, we're having, I'm an ICANN shore board, and it's just the whole way it's handled is a problem for the people to get in, and they're outsourcing the inspections. So the guy says you need 3 GFI outlets, and I have to come back after you put them in. So he schedules 3 weeks later to come look at these 3 outlets, because I think they get paid every time they do an inspection.
They do. I've actually brought this up to the old board. McWright, I believe, it's outsourced. It's like a company down south, and they are definitely paid by the visit, so they make it a point to come back. So I did prefer when the inspections were done by Anna's staff. Like Jenny was excellent to work with, etc. But we're usually given advance notice of an inspection. We do our own pre-inspection to make sure that it would pass. Anything that's kind of maybe gray area, we repair it in advance. So we've pretty much gotten 95 to 98% pass rate over the years.
So I guess just one other topic, I guess, to throw out sort of on this conversation. And I just want to flag, I have to go at 4:00 for another meeting. I would like to also, hear a little bit from Barry if we have time, but it's just, in terms of the tiers themselves, whether, we want to look at, well, we have 25% for Section 8. So obviously that gets to, trying to reach people at certain income levels. And we want to kind of incorporate anything else or any other language into the structure that we have that, tries to get at folks, but very low income. I don't know, Diana, did you have any specific ideas? I know you and I had talked about this previously.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about, Tom Murphy, the mayor of the village, has talked a lot about people who live in our community and Mamaroneck who live in sort of unsafe housing, whether it's not code compliant or just, overburdened, altogether, and, how challenging that is for, residents in our community. And, thinking about who, is able to get into these nice and safe apartments, it seems like if we can, accommodate residents, who maybe already live in our community, that would be, really serving the public interest. And obviously we have, the tier 1 and tier 2 that we're already focusing on, but if we could, do that as well, it seems like it would be a big public benefit and, meet a real demand in our community.
Mhm. And I guess, Diana, do you have any sort of specific ideas in terms of like language that, comes to mind that you were thinking about that? Because I guess that's sort of the question is like the way we describe the tiers now is that, are we all, kind of happy with that, or are there other things kind of given for some of the shifts, even like what you described, and just the need to be more descriptive? I guess, is that the question, Diana? Maybe in some of the top tiers or something?
Yeah, I mean, we could, think about saying people who live in, the town of Mamaroneck and the two villages, and maybe put even an income cap on there. So we're able to get people who are already residents that may, be living in this unsafe housing or, not, but are still able to afford this rent. A little bit of a priority because like we talked about, I mean, there's a long waiting list and people are on it for years. So potentially if you're all the way down at tier 5 or 6 and we're really prioritizing, 1 and 2, how would you ever get in, right?
So I'll kind of touch base. So I think the income cap is based on the medium income, and there's a percentage of that. We get that information from Anna Denoy every year, and we still have to kind of tweak our 2021 figures. I think I'll do that usually every April. And every year when people redo their lease or every 2 years, we do ask for proof of income. So if someone is teetering on the upper limits, we put them on notice saying, hey, by the way, if you start making over this amount, you'll be asked to basically find a new apartment. We have had cases in the past where, tenants exceeded that amount, and they said it was like, we gave them an opportunity saying, hey, this is the last time we'll sign your lease unless, you start making less. So we do assess, people's income when they do renew their lease. And I think in the tier list, I don't have it in front of me right now, it does say that, if you work in the town and you're over this age, or if you've lived in the town for this amount of years, we do give them some sort of priority. So we kind of keep people that live in the community, and give them an opportunity to live in somewhat, decent housing that's safe and clean. And, so, I mean, if you want to work on tiers, kind of expand on them and maybe clarify them, though, that tier list, and I actually pulled a Homix app from the 90s. It's pretty much stayed the same. It hasn't really changed much.
Would it make sense if we don't even change the tier list, but we prioritize people just not on a first come first serve basis, but on income, so that the lower your income, the higher up you are on the waiting list? Is that something we could do, or would that be illegal?
I think that's a good idea, Frank.
I'm sorry?
I think that's a good idea.
But are we talking about income trumping tier 1 and 2? I mean,
No, income would trump when you apply. So right now it sounds like if you're a tier 1 and you applied in April, and there was another tier 1 applied in October of the same year, the April would go in first.
That's how it currently works.
Maybe what we should do is look at tiers. Tier 1, you rank, you apply, and then you go to the top of the list if you have the lower income.
I think that would be problematic when you're dealing with a group of people who are volunteers in the same organization or employees in the same organization. I could see it in the lower tiers, but it could mean that, for instance, the fireman who's been on the list for X number of months, and the brand new employee who comes in, whose salary happens to be less because that person is a clerk and not in a supervisory role, is going to leapfrog. I think that could cause a lot of problems.
I agree on that.
Okay, well, okay, all right.
But we have other categories where the resident category. I mean, that lends itself to town and village residents focusing more on income than not. I mean,
that's tier 5.
We don't have a lot of rich people who want to live in the Homix apartments. So you're not talking about middle class or upper middle class. We have income restrictions to begin with. But that's a category where you could pick, for instance, I'm just throwing it out, where you may want to focus a little more in that direction.
I mean,
So
even tier 3 is a residency tier, isn't it? That's
But
an-
But there's one, we have applicants from, tier 3 and tier 5 are sort of, in some ways they overlap, and a lot of 3s tend to be somewhat involved in the town or have, I think we have a police officer there who's been there a long time, and
mhm,
I just
yeah,
put them up on the screen again, so for clarity.
all right.
So just people who are general current residents are in tier 5.
Right. And 3 is 62 years of age, so we could work with 5.
so yeah, I'll kind of what Dolores stated about, it's a very tight knit community, especially in the volunteer and the employees and the people who live at Homix. And everyone knows when there's a vacancy, word gets around, especially in those certain kind of divisions of the town. And I don't think, letting someone leapfrog someone is going to be good for not only us, but those certain divisions. I think we can maybe implement it on like outsiders where they really don't know about the ins and outs of Homix, maybe like starting that at tier 5. But, then people are going to like, what's the point of applying? I make 80,000. I really can't afford a $2,500 one bedroom in Larchmont, and this person applied that makes 60,000. Why are they getting the apartment before? It can lead to a lot of problems, and it's hard to kind of manage something like that. And I know we are trying to do what's best, but it can cause havoc.
Partly it depends on how you define or you describe what the Homix role is. But
I agree with you, Frank.
I mean, if you're saying that what we're trying to do is provide workforce housing and, make housing, as affordable as we can, then people know that that's one of the criteria. But I understand the issue, and maybe you exempt tier 1 and 2, and then 3 and above, you could implement it or something. But I'm just trying to respond or react as, are there ways we can try to accomplish the other goal of providing a little bit more affordable housing in town? The people on tier 8, I mean, anyone in tier 8, I'd give that to someone, other people. I would definitely do some of these tiers by income levels. But again, I don't know how to implement it, and that might be more trouble than it's worth. So I'm just throwing out an idea, and then we can, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So.
Frank, I'd be happy to work with you on, we can kind of put pen to paper and come up with a proposal if you want. We can happy to work on that with you together, and then we can come back to if that's okay, Melissa.
Historically, it was sold to the town, and the town went forward to have it workforce housing and affordable housing for the community. That was the philosophy and the purpose that was given to the town residents for supporting it. I mean, this is a pretty controversial thing when it started. We had to condemn the motel, buy the motel, and then figure out how to get the housing built. All the developers walked away because we were focusing on affordability and workforce. And we've had to figure out how to do it ourselves. And in fact, that housing authority, I think, was formed because it was one of the ways that we qualified for a certain amount of funding. And we were, and we didn't use any CDAG money, I think, which is why we were allowed to use the tiers, which I don't think you can use these tiers anymore. I don't
Very
know.
antiquated. Yeah, very antiquated. You're on mute. Oh.
Sorry, when am I going to get that straight? I apologize. Well, I think it makes sense. I mean, sort of two things. One, obviously these tiers have been in place the way they have since for a very long time. So I think reviewing them, makes sense, right? And then, if Diana and Frank, if you want to sort of take a look and just, put your heads together and come back and have, further conversation with some specific ideas to talk about, I think that sounds like, good stuff.
Reviewing that list is really a first step, because you've already mentioned that the person we identified at the school district who actually was sending us is no longer there. So this list is old, it's outdated, even though it may only be 3 or 4 years old. And that's very important. So is it going out to the right person in the particular, and should there be organizations that, there are newer organizations in town that probably aren't on the list.
Yeah,
Um,
The tiers were set up, I think, in the original lease.
yeah,
And I couldn't tell specifically, do we as a board have the authority from the lease to be able to tweak those and make them different? I mean, it was listed as Schedule A. Can we monkey with them at all, or do we have to sort of keep those tiers, but we could put some criteria on each tier?
I think you're asking a legal question.
yeah, I don't think we can tweak them too much, but we can certainly, we can establish our own criteria for selection within a tier.
Within the tiers, okay.
So, and if philosophically the board says when, you know, someone falls into 7 or 8, and Nuna says 3 of them qualify, we make a decision about, in the past, we didn't really decide who the tenants would be. I mean, it just happened automatically. But maybe what you're saying is when we get down to those last 3 tiers, that the board is going to adopt a philosophy that if everyone's equal, pick the person who's definitely in the community and appears to be the neediest. I mean, that's a philosophical decision the board could think about doing.
mhm. That's
Yeah,
a
I
good
think-
point, Dolores, yeah.
And I think also just reviewing the language just to make sure it, you know, it sort of still makes sense today, like that, just in general, you know. I was just reading it on the slide, and even for me, like a tier 3, a little bit unclear just the way it's written. So there may be just a little bit cleanup that doesn't change, you know, the substance of it, but this makes it a little bit more clear.
Mhm.
So I guess in terms of next steps, then, you know, specifically, it's 2 parts. Right, it's looking at the distribution, the contact list, and cleaning that up and getting that, you know, more robust and up to date. And then it's sort of looking at this bigger question and just kind of reviewing the tiers that we have, seeing if there's any, you know, tweaks that we want to suggest.
Is there,
Making-
speaking of contact, is there a place where you could send that says for Section 8, is there like a centralized place in the county that would say, we have Section 8 housing available? I mean, is that even something we want to do? But I don't.
We have that locally with Anna's office,
It goes to Anna.
Okay.
and-
Just
and
locally,
She is
okay.
the
flooded,
dead roll of a wait list.
flooded with people who apply. I mean, the numbers were unbelievable when thousands and thousands of people apply, and a handful wind up with a voucher. There are
Yeah.
very few vouchers.
Yeah, so we don't need to advertise more widely than just Anna's office because of the, you know, as Dolores mentioned, over 10,000 people applied when that list was opened, and such a small number have even been selected from that lottery that if it's just like the Dead Sea Scroll of a wait list. So
An interesting old historical note, but in the process of doing this early on, Caroline and Silverstone and I discovered that the Section 8 rates for Westchester were tied to New York City. And they were dramatically lower and completely out of scale with Westchester rents. And that's why landlords were dropping out. And at the same time that condos and co-ops apartments were being converted. So we had to do this lobbying thing with the congressional delegation throughout Westchester to get Westchester created as its own Section 8 district in terms of determining the rents.
It's also now based on zip code as well.
Right.
And you can use Mamaroneck choice vouchers in other zip codes like in New Rochelle as well. So they have expanded where they're used. And we do have a special relationship with Anna and her team there. When a vacancy does happen, they handle that process and we work with them. And we've fine-tuned it over the years where we can get these apartments with minimal rent loss in between. Yeah, that's been worked out over the years. So it's down to pretty much a science. And a lot of the people in Anna's team have lived at Homix or still currently do. So they understand the community and the happenings there.
None of our rents still comparable with Section 8 rents?
Yes, they're below the FMR.
Yeah, so we don't really, there's no economic loss at all to us to take a Section 8 tenant.
Yeah, we're actually a lot lower than the current FMR.
The FMR is pretty juicy for Larchmont and the Mamaroneck.
It sure is.
If they did it by you know, the housing price, and I can email that around if you guys want to
Well,
see it.
it's juicy compared to, you know, let's say New Rochelle and other vicinities, but it's still very difficult for that voucher holder to find something that,
Yep,
yeah, it's not enough.
yep.
Okay.
And this new inspection process has made a lot of people drop out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, you know,
I hate to interrupt, and you guys should, absolutely continue on the conversation. I do have to drop off for another meeting. And Barry, I'm sorry, I don't have time, but if other folks want to stay on and talk a little bit about the community solar, that would be great. I'm sorry, I can't stay longer. But
I think it might be better to have you on the call, on a discussion on solar, so.
okay,
Makes
so
sense.
we can say that we have a regular meeting in 2 weeks, I think, in March 2nd. Or March 4th, I think March 2nd.
When
So-
is the next meeting?
Let me double check the calendar.
And do you always meet on the same day of the month or no?
No, what we've been doing, and this is open to other suggestions, is just at the end of our meetings, we just look at our calendars and schedule the
I
next
just want
meeting.
to know if there was a particular night I had put away.
We're just trying to see what works for most people. So we have on the calendar now March 2nd at 7:30 for more of a regularly scheduled meeting, sort of a special meeting. I kind of, I don't know what folks think, but I think if there is a special topic that kind of we need a whole hour to talk about, it's sort of maybe not a bad practice to have an afternoon kind of just discussion focused on a specific thing. Because when we have our regular meetings, we just have a lot of regular business to get through. So maybe, that's just.
Yeah, this was very helpful for me to spend the hour on the one topic rather than trying to use up.
Yeah, no, for me too. I think it would have, I felt badly that I missed it, but at the same time, I think it would have got short shrift if we had tried to squeeze it in with all the other things we have.
and just, we will, I think, meet in the first week of March. I don't have the exact date written down, but just so everyone is aware on the board, Louis is going to be out on workers' comp. I did file a claim with a carrier, and he is currently, waiting MRI results. He's seeing a specialist. So I do have a neighboring superintendent servicing the building. The place has probably never looked better. So it's working currently, and we await Louis' results. And I will be in touch with the town in terms of what we discussed in terms of what's going on. So things are being covered temporarily. I have the snow vendor handling the snow today. So things are not going, astray over there. So things are being handled, and things are moving along very quickly. And I will discuss kind of more on the operational side in 2 weeks. There's not really, I think everything that was on our to-do list of last meeting has been handled at this point. So things are moving along pretty smoothly.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Nuno.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. We know it's not been easy.
Uh,
No, that's the understatement of the year. And I'm so sorry, guys. I really have to jump
All right.
off. So I don't know if you want to make a motion to close the meeting, but you're welcome to obviously continue just to chat about whatever loose
I think
items.
we're good.
We're good. So does anybody want to make a motion?
I move, we adjourn.
I'll second it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Dolores, for joining us. And thank you guys all for making the
I'm
time
looking forward
today.
to it.
This is a really helpful conversation. Diana, thanks so much for kind of, prompting it and putting all the materials together.
Welcome. And Frank, I'll follow up directly with you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great to see everybody. Take good care.